The Milgram effect. You are a good person. You know this about yourself. You would never hurt an innocent stranger. You've never tortured anyone. You've never followed an order you knew was wrong. That's what most people believe about themselves. In the summer of 1961, a psychologist at Yale University decided to test that belief. What he found should have changed everything about how we see human beings. It didn't, because almost nobody was willing to accept what the results actually meant. This is the Milgram experiment. And this is what happened. Stanley Milgram was 27 years old when he ran the experiment. A psychologist at Yale obsessed with one specific question that had haunted the world since World War II. How did ordinary Germans, teachers, fathers, accountants, people with families, participate in the Holocaust? The standard answer was they were different. They were raised differently. They were conditioned by a specific culture of obedience. Milgram wasn't sure that was true. He placed a small ad in a New Haven newspaper. Volunteers wanted for a memory study. $4 for 1 hour of your time. People came from all walks of life. Factory workers, engineers, salesmen, high school teachers, men in their 20s, men in their 50s, perfectly ordinary people. When each volunteer arrived, they were met by a man in a gray lab coat, an authority figure. He explained the study. They were testing the effect of punishment on learning. The volunteer would be the teacher. Another participant, a middle-aged, pleasant-looking man, would be the learner. The learner was strapped into a chair in the next room, electrodes attached to his wrist. The teacher sat in front of a large machine. A shock generator. It had 30 switches, each labeled with a voltage. 15 volts, 30, 45, all the way up to 450 volts. At 300 volts, the label read, danger, severe shock. At 450, there were 3 words. Case 6. The rules were simple. The learner had to memorize word pairs. Blue, sky, bread, butter, wild, duck. The teacher read out the first word and 4 possible answers. The learner had to press the button with the correct second word. Every time he got one wrong, the teacher would deliver a shock. And with each wrong answer, the voltage would increase. What the teacher didn't know, the learner was an actor. There were no real shocks. The machine wasn't connected to anything. Milgram wasn't testing memory at all. He was testing obedience. The experiment began normally. The learner made mistakes. The teacher pressed switches. At low voltages, there was no response from the next room. Then at 75 volts, the learner made a sound, a grunt. At 120 volts, he shouted that the shocks were painful. At 150 volts, he demanded to be let out. He said he had heart trouble. He wanted to stop. Most teachers hesitated. Some said, "I don't think I should continue." The man in the gray lab coat said 4 things. In order, if needed, please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Nothing else. No threats. No punishment for stopping. No reward for continuing. Just a calm instruction from a man in authority. At 270 volts, the learner screamed. Then silence. At 300 volts, he pounded on the wall. Then nothing. Complete silence. Many teachers asked, "What does silence mean? Is he okay? Should we stop?" The man in the lab coat said, "Treat no response as an incorrect answer. Continue." And most of them did. Before running the experiment, Milgram asked psychiatrists what they predicted. The consensus, less than 1% of participants would go all the way to 450 volts. Only pathological sadists, a tiny fringe, would do something like that. The actual result, 65% of participants delivered the maximum shock, not 1%. 65. 2 out of every 3 ordinary people, when instructed by a calm authority figure, pushed a switch they believed could kill a stranger. And here's the part that gets lost in every retelling. They weren't monsters. They didn't enjoy it. Milgram described his subjects as visibly distressed, trembling, sweating, laughing nervously, begging the experimenter to stop the study. Several had full breakdowns in the chair. One man shook so badly his colleagues in the observation room thought he was having a seizure. They knew something was wrong. They felt it. they did it anyway. Milgram didn't stop after the first experiment. He ran 19 variations, and each one revealed something new about where obedience comes from and where it breaks down. When the learner was in the same room, when the teacher could see his face, could watch him react to every shock, obedience dropped to 40%. When the teacher had to physically hold the learner's hand down onto a metal plate to deliver the shock, it dropped to 30%. When the authority figure gave instructions by phone instead of in the room, it dropped to 20%. When two experimenters argued in front of the teacher, one saying stop, one saying continue, the rate dropped to 0. When the teacher was in a group and watched two others refuse to continue, 60% also refused. The obedience wasn't coming from something broken inside people. It was coming from the situation. Remove the authority, close the distance, create a peer who says no, and the behavior collapses. Hannah Arendt watched the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem in 1961, the same year Milgram ran his experiment. Adolf Eichmann organized the logistics of the Holocaust, the trains, the schedules, the paperwork. He was responsible for the deaths of millions. In court, he was not what people expected. He was not a demon. He was not visibly insane. He was bureaucratic, precise. He kept saying he was following orders, that it wasn't his department, that he was a small part of a large system. Arendt wrote that what she saw was not radical evil. She called it the banality of evil. The horror wasn't in the monster. It was in the ordinary person doing their job. Milgram's experiment gave that idea a number, 65%. And this is where it gets personal, because the research that followed Milgram didn't just apply to wartime atrocities. It applied to offices, to hospitals, to schools, to anywhere there is a hierarchy and someone at the top giving instructions. In 2009, psychologist Jerry Berger replicated Milgram's study at Santa Clara University. He stopped at 150 volts, the point where the learner first demanded to be freed. Even with that limit, 70% of participants continued past that point when told to. The number, 50 years later, was higher. Milgram spent the rest of his life trying to answer what felt like the most important question. What makes a person stop? Not compliance. What makes someone refuse? The answer from all 19 variations was remarkably consistent. One thing, someone else saying no first. The moment a peer, a colleague, another ordinary person in the same situation said, "I'm not doing this," the spell broke. The percentage of people who continued dropped by more than half. You don't need a hero. You need one person to go first. Milgram wrote, "The social psychology of this century reveals a major lesson. Often it is not so much the kind of person a man is, as the kind of situation in which he finds himself that determines how he will act. We want to believe we are exceptions, that we would have refused, that we would have known. Most of us are not exceptions. But here's what the data also shows. We don't have to be. We just have to be the first one to say no."